Building muscle as a woman can be misconstrued with the idea of looking bulky like a bodybuilder.
The first time I dropped the word powerlifting, they immediately turned around and said, "You're going to look like a man. Why are you doing that?"
Getting big in my upper body was something I was really nervous about as well. I train really hard. I train shoulders. I've still not got that bulky physique.
They've actually said to me, I don't want to achieve the look that you've got. You look great, but I don't want my arms to be like that or anything. I take it as a compliment.
Perpetual dieting is really bad for your hormonal health. People are starting to lose their cycle. Your menstrual cycle isn't just an indicator of things like fertility, it's also an indicator of things like bone health.
I lost my menstrual cycle when I was prep phase for my first competition. You know, the more that you diet, the lower energy that you have available.
I had to get to above a certain body weight for my cycle. Someone could be like a lower body weight and still have theirs, and someone might have to get a bit higher to get theirs back.
Something else to keep in mind is you don't see what's going on behind the scenes, and they probably feel terrible most of the time because being that lean doesn't feel good. A lot of these images, even videos now, are edited. Some of the waistlines you see carved out on images in social media, they just don't happen that way.
Okay, so I think this is a really interesting episode that we're recording today because we're going to hear from the women coaches, the female coaches here at RNT, around the mindset and what it really takes from a perspective of building muscle. And building muscle as a woman can sometimes feel quite intimidating. Sometimes it can be misconstrued with the idea of getting bulky. And it's a myth that continues to be perpetuated even in 2023, that if you lift weights, you maybe end up looking bulky like a bodybuilder. But as we know, it's not quite like that. But perhaps it's better hearing that from a woman than hearing it from me. So let's start off by answering, why should women not feel afraid to lift weights in the fear of being bulky? Maybe kick it off with Shona.
Yeah, great question. It's quite a common thing even now to see posts on social media about certain things that are tailored towards women's training and how not to get bulky when you lift. I think quite a common misconception is the what makes a bulky physique. So generally speaking, women especially, your dream physique is probably going to be carrying much more muscle mass than you realize. It's not the muscle that makes people look bulky. Generally speaking, it's going to be carrying the excess body fat. If it was a case of, one or two or even 3 or 4 sessions in the gym each week was going to turn you into Mr. Olympia overnight, then we'd have an awful lot more very big women walking around. But it's something that actually takes like years and years of dedicated hard training to achieve anything like that. Training for your health and training for just a little bit of muscle gain or training to look better the next time you diet isn't going to create the bulky look that people are worried about.
Yeah. Did you ever feel that fear yourself?
Yeah, for sure. When I first started out, it was one of the things I was actually quite worried about. But it was, for me, I think the realization hit not long after I'd finished, after I'd stopped dieting the first time around, that there was no amount of dieting that was going to create the dream physique that I wanted. I was just going to look the same but skinnier every time I just kept dieting. And actually I needed to be carrying more muscle mass, but it still took me a while to get over that hurdle. It's just one of those things you have to lean into and give it some time.
And how do you overcome that hurdle? Like the idea of that I actually need to go through this in order to get the physique that I want to get.
I think seeing the other benefits to that style of training and that type of eating really, really helps. So it's not just the aesthetics that you're going for with that. It's restoring things like your physical health after you diet. It's prioritizing your bone health in the long run. It's prioritizing your strength, your ability to do day-to-day tasks, your energy levels. There are so many other benefits to getting stronger and building muscle mass.
What about yourself, Chloe? Have you experienced that similar sort of misconception?
Yeah, definitely experienced that. I've had that with past clients that I've passed PT'd before, where they've actually said to me, I don't want to achieve the look that you've got. They're like, you look great, but I don't want my arms to be like that or anything. I take it as a compliment, but I think a lot of women think as soon as they start lifting the weight, they're going to build that amount of muscle so quickly, when in reality it's taken me years to do so. And I think that holds a lot of people back. And I explained that the amount of work that goes into that, and being in a surplus for a prolonged period of time, because if you're staying at maintenance calories and you're training hard, it doesn't mean you're gonna put on loads of weight because you're maintaining. So I think it's the fact of if you go into a surplus and you're training hard, then the rate of gain is going to be more than if you're just maintaining and looking to build a little bit of muscle.
What does training hard actually look like then for building muscle as a woman?
I'd say like pushing all sets till failure. So you shouldn't have any reps left in the tank with your lifts, and you should be progressing over time with your weights, your reps, and having a structured program in place. Because when I first started the gym, I think one of the things that held me back from making the progress that I'm seeing now is that I was just going into the gym, doing random things, neglecting certain muscles. But now I have like a structured plan in place. I'm able to like stick to certain rep ranges. I have a better idea of what failure is for me, because at first, like, you don't know what failure is because you've never like experienced or pushed yourself to that. So it does take time to get to that. So when someone first starts, I wouldn't expect them to be able to do that, but it's something that we expect someone to progress to over time.
Yeah. I think the biggest limiting factor for anyone building muscle, male or female, is typically training intensity. I think few people struggle with hitting a calorie surplus unless they're really having appetite issues. But I think it's the training intensity that differentiates good and great physiques and good and great results. So just circling back to Shona, because I know you're always posting hard training videos in our cohort. Like what's helped you lift some serious weights? Maybe give a couple of your best lifts, and how you've sort of taken yourself to that extreme of training intensity.
I think it's a lot of it comes from the powerlifting background. So in that time, there were a lot of big lifts that I took to real failure. Literally, not a single muscle was working anymore. And that's really taught me what a hard set feels like. I think that point of real muscular failure is much further away than people think it is. I mean, it took me a really long time to push past 100 kilos on squats because I'd got it into my head that if I got up to that point, I was going to fail the rep. And I can't remember, I think the first time I ever did it, I only managed it for one rep. And then I tried it again and just went in with the mentality of, well, the worst that can happen is I sit down on the floor and the bar has to roll away from me. And ended up getting 5 or 6 reps on the next attempt with that weight. And that really taught me what grinding out a rep was.
You're a kind of grinder when it comes to reps. Like, you know, if your video, you're slowing down on your reps and you still got like 5 left. You know, some people can just keep going.
Not everything. On squats, yes, absolutely. Yeah. On some other lifts, I think I just hit a wall and just muscular failure happens really, really quickly. I think to get used to what failing a rep feels like for you, it's a good idea to experiment with machines first, something which has a high stability factor, so something where you're fully supported. So say you're doing leg extensions, you could take that to failure quite easily without anything bad happening. And then you know whether you're going to be the kind of person that reps slow down loads, but you can still grind out more, or whether you're the kind of person that the set's going fine, and then as soon as the reps start slowing down, that's where failure happens for you.
What are some of your numbers then?
What, right now?
Yeah. Oh, out of all time, like when you were powerlifting, like just to put it into perspective.
I think the best squat was 115. The best deadlift was 130 something. And the best bench was 70, something like that. This was at around 59 body weight.
Hopefully some of the guys are feeling a bit humbled right now.
That took me a long time. That took years. And I've not touched those numbers since. But it's very possible to do with really, really hard training.
Yeah. And did you ever fear like, oh, I'm going to look bulky, or I'm going to turn into a man? You hear these things, right?
Yeah.
Did you ever fear this? Did you just run through your mind? How did you just sort of eradicate that? So you're just hell-bent on performance and just the health benefits. Like how did that switch happen?
I think some of it was defiance, honestly, because there was I heard it more from other people. You know, my parents, whenever I spoke to them about the sport that I was doing, whenever the first time I dropped the word powerlifting, they immediately turned around and said, "You're going to look like a man. Why are you doing that?" And that just solidified in my head, well, I'm going to do it now. I could prove you wrong. As combined with knowing what the real benefits to doing something like that were. But that was part of the turning point, definitely.
Yeah. Just shifting gears now, Alice, you are currently in a sort of mini diet where you've got ambitions to drastically improve your physique over the next 18 months to potentially compete in 2024. Now, to improve your physique, when competition is involved, it does involve an element of embracing the fluff, where you have to gain a little bit more body fat than you potentially like to. You have to walk around a little bit heavier than you like to. And, in the past when I've done it, I often look untrained. I've joked in the past where I've said that when I was at my absolute peak of bodybuilding off seasons, I'd be 90 kilos, pushing 4,500 calories down, training like an animal. But I had other personal trainers, clients saying to them when I was on the gym floor, "Is Akash still training?" And I'm there thinking, I couldn't be more dialed in right now. But it's just that when I go past a certain body weight, I just look untrained and just look like a bigger version of skinny fat moves in a pot belly than I started off at. So how are you battling that? And what's the mindset you're taking to improve your physique?
So I think that I obviously got this very big goal in my head where I'm actually changing category. So I competed as a bikini athlete and now I'm changing to tone figure. So I need a little bit more muscle mass. So I know that I need to go through this period of bulking to really get a little bit more muscle. And at first I struggled with having the excess body weight. And like you were saying, you feel a little bit untrained. I was worried that people were going to see me and think, does she even train? Is she even a personal trainer? Blah, blah, blah. But actually, I had a mindset shift because I started to look at, when you're in a cut, you see those weekly, you see the scale going down, you see some definition, you see some lines coming through. There's all those kind of short-term wins that kind of tell you you're going on the right track. And when it comes to muscle building, you don't necessarily have that. You just see yourself gaining more body fat. But I had this kind of light bulb moment where I thought, if I don't actually fully commit to this and I don't, really go through the process and embrace the fluff, then I'm not going to be in the shape that I want to be when I cut next time for this competition, and I'm not going to be able to be competitive. And so that having that kind of light bulb moment and realizing that actually all those little short-term wins were great, but I need to actually really invest in this to be able to be where I want to be later on down the line. So I think, that's kind of, I had that light bulb moment, and that, I thought about that long-term goal, and that is where I needed to be. So that's kind of how I made that shift.
Why do you want to make a weight class jump?
I actually prefer the posing style. So I just found that actually that is still kind of that hourglass X-frame shape, but the posing style suits my body a lot better. And I have quite capped shoulders, so I think it would suit figure quite nicely. And I would like to grow my quads, which you don't kind of have massive quads in bikini. So that's kind of why I want to make the jump towards figure, and maybe athletic figure in the future. I never know.
So a lot of women might hear that and think massive quads, capped shoulders. That might find a bit intimidating. Is that what happens when you do that? But maybe give some context around it. Yeah.
So with kind of with bikini, with tone figure, with that kind of bodybuilding, you do have to get really lean as well. Obviously, the higher up you go in the classes, it might not be to what the average woman wants to kind of look like, which is absolutely fine. But with kind of tone figure and things like that, it's very much about having that hourglass shape, and in order to kind of show that off, you need to have kind of a slightly sort of more capped shoulders, so slightly more rounded shoulders, to be able to give the illusion that the waist is a little bit smaller. And so you create, and you're kind of sculpting your figure in order to create that hourglass shape. So kind of bikini tone figure, you need a good amount of muscle mass, but it's not what I would consider as being bulky or anything like that.
Yeah, that's good to clarify. Why have you gotten into the physique world or bodybuilding or figure, etc.? Why do you do it?
I mean, I started off wanting to do it because I was really I saw a lot of people doing it. I was very inspired by a lot of people. And I just thought that takes so much dedication. That's such an amazing thing to be able to push yourself to be able to do something like that and be able to show off what you've kind of sculpted and worked on and created. And the discipline and dedication that goes into it is incredible. And when I first, gave it a shot, I really surprised myself that I was actually able to take myself there win my first competition and that kind of thing. And I actually found a really big love for it, and being able to see how my body is capable of doing so much. And I'm 5 foot nothing, I'm a small girl, but I can lift quite a lot, especially with my upper body, which I never thought I'd be able to do. And give us
some numbers.
Well, recently I've been shoulder pressing like 17.5 kilograms. I did it like dumbbells each side, did it for 8, so I think I could get a little bit more for like 6 reps, but that was my first attempt, so I think I could do a bit more. But and my RDLs have shot up to like 105 kilos, which I'm really proud of. But yeah, getting bigger in my upper body was something I was really nervous about, as well as like Shona and Chloe and think everyone has said. But I train really hard. I train shoulders several times a week, and I've still not got that bulky physique or that kind of masculine physique that I was really worried about or scared about. So I think that's why I quite enjoying seeing how my body's changing, and the shapes it's creating was actually still looking really feminine as well.
Just switching gears back to Shona, why did you start training in the first place, and why was it powerlifting? Did that come straight away, or did that come a few years down the line?
That came pretty much straight away. There was a lot going on in my life at the time, and a lot going on at home that was like really quite difficult. And I wanted to be able to give something back. I wanted to be able to support everyone. And to me, the training and the training style and the goals that are linked in with powerlifting or any kind of weightlifting training they're sort of intrinsically geared towards that. I think you are what you do most of the time. And I think that goes for both training and in life. So, if I wanted to be the kind of person that was strong enough to show up in support of my relatives and for the people around me, then I needed to be the kind of person that was strong enough to show up at the gym, the kind of person that was strong enough to physically support themselves as well as mentally.
Yeah. And what did powerlifting give you? Like what is it about lifting very, very heavy weights for basically 1 rep and testing your strength? What is that like taught you and given you?
A lot. It's incredibly therapeutic, the style of training. There's a lot that you have to put into those sets. So it's a great release of stress. It also teaches you what you're capable of. I think around the time I was struggling a lot with a very limited mentality. And I didn't think I'd ever be able to lift anything over 100 kilos. That sounded crazy to me at the time. And breaking down that mental barrier it brought into question a lot of the other things that I told myself I couldn't do. And I was sort of led from there onwards thinking, actually, maybe I can. Maybe my health can get better. Maybe I can support my friends and my family better.
Chloe, a lot of women, and I just want to build on Shona's point, will only ever train when there's dieting involved. They'll only ever train to lose body weight and see it as a part of the process to just get lighter or get slimmer. But once you reach your weight loss goals, many women struggle to stay consistent and will sort of teeter around various different things. They may try classes, they may try other things, or they may do nothing. And then the next time they're in the gym is when they want to lose weight again. How do you switch gears to see the value thereafter and make it as part of your day-to-day routine? Where do you see your personal value in it?
I think that firstly, like looking at your physique at the end of a diet and whether you're happy with that is a good start. Because if you look at yourself and you're like, oh, I'd like, say, like more cap shoulders or like bigger legs or something, then you want to invest some time into actually building that when you're not in a deficit. Because when you're in a deficit, you're really focusing on maintaining the muscle mass you already have. But when you go into maintenance or a surplus, that's the time when you can really see the growth. And then you can like work on certain areas, build the muscle. So then the next time that you do diet, then you'll be able to reveal that muscle. So I think it's not just about going in and out of diets, because if you're not training hard in that period of time, the next time you diet, you're not actually going to look any different. And I think it helps also not have that yo-yo effect with dieting, because you're actually focusing on improving your health for the long term rather than focusing on just short-term fat loss goals. And And as Shona's mentioned, there's a lot of other benefits outside of just your physique, like mental benefits, bone health, and everything like that. So if you look at the bigger picture and aren't always striving for fat loss, but are actually looking at your health and longevity, then there's a lot of other things that you can really use as motivation.
So is it fair to say that if a woman's dieting and they think, oh, I don't actually have the curves that I was hoping for, or the glutes that I was hoping for, it's not, that can't be solved in a dieting phase?
No, you'd have to spend time going into like surplus to build it. So that's where I struggled in the past, where I was looking at people and wanting this certain physique, but I was just constantly like in a deficit or not eating enough to fuel the gains. And then as soon as I actually went into a surplus, started gaining weight, although I did gain body fat, I did gain so much muscle mass in that time. And now this time round, now I'm cutting down after I've spent years like working my body weight up. And now I'm hoping that this time around, when I do get leaner, I'm actually going to have the physique that I was after back a few years ago.
What's the maybe one for Shona, like what's the role of strength training for women in bone health, in hormonal health, and just so overall well-being?
It's massive. It's massive. Strength training has for a really long time been proven to have massive benefits on your bone density. I think as well, there's perpetual dieting is really bad for your hormonal health. You know, if people are starting to lose their cycle, if they're feeling really low, their libido is low, then that's a really, like, your menstrual cycle isn't just an indicator of things like fertility, it's also an indicator of things like bone health. So in order to improve all of those things, you need to come out of a diet. If long-term health is in your vision, which I think for a lot of people it is, or it really should be, then coming out of that diet and going into a surplus is essential, or at least being at maintenance with enough energy available.
What does that mean, energy available?
That means that would mean practically eating enough to support your activity level. It would mean sustaining a level of body fat that your menstrual cycle is regular, that your energy level is regular, that you are able to do a level of activity as well that's not just sustainable, but that you enjoy. One
thing you mentioned was recovering your health after recovering your menstrual cycle and your health after a period of dieting. I know you've experienced this. I think all three of you have experienced this to an extent in the past for various different reasons. Maybe we'll shift this one to Alice. What is it? Well, firstly, how does that? What happens when that happens, practically speaking, and then how do you recover from it?
So basically, I lost my menstrual cycle when I was in my prep phase for my first competition. And what basically happens is, you know, the more that you diet, the kind of lower energy that you have available, the tighter you get, your hormones will, you know, they'll fluctuate a lot. I had a lot of mood swings, very low libido. And yeah, I just really, really struggled to kind of like do the bare minimum. And so then when I finished my competition, instead of prioritizing, you know, just how my physique and wanting to stay as lean as possible, I knew that it was essential for me to get back to a place where I was healthy and I had my menstrual cycle back. So what I did from then is I was on quite low calories at that point. Obviously, when I had my competition, I bumped my calories up quite a bit, had lots of good healthy fats in there. And I actually tapered down a lot of my cardio. I was doing an hour of cardio every single day. So I tapered that right back. And although I put on body fat, which I had to, I got my menstrual cycle back within a couple of months. So I was very lucky for it to come back so quickly. But it's through bumping up my calories, getting myself back to kind of like a healthier way of a lifestyle of living, that I was able to do that.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things for those listening, wondering like why you may lose your cycle. I think for many women, if you're going to get very, very, very lean, it may just happen no matter how well you do it. It will just be a part of the process because you're going, you know, you're getting into a very lean state. But when that kicks in will depend on the person and also how safely you're doing it. If you're doing it in a very crash diet sense or way, then, you know, the likelihood of it probably increases and comes a bit earlier. But I think it's just important to recognize that if you want to get extremely lean, there is the risk And that's why, expertise and guidance can really help you understand and manage that risk and understand when is it time to push and when is it time to pull. Does anyone have anything else to share on their own sort of menstrual cycle experiences? And feel free to just go for it.
I think when my body weight got to a certain level after maintaining lean for so long, that's when like mine actually like started and kicked in after years of it not even starting when I was younger. So I had to get to like above a certain body weight for my cycle. So I think it's like personal, like someone could be like a lower body weight and still have theirs, and someone might have to get a bit higher to get theirs back. So I think it's important, like, not just to focus on the number on the scale, because I know that a lot of women do focus on that, especially after they've come out of a fat loss phase. They're sort of attached to this number or this range, and I was attached to numbers for so long. And then as soon as I sort of like let go of that and went more by how I looked and felt and everything, that's when my period come back. So I think switching the focus and ensuring that you're looking after your health and not just trying to look as small as possible is really important.
Shona, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think stress is also a big consideration for things like your menstrual cycle. We've mentioned that everybody responds slightly differently. I've lost mine at a couple of different stages. So one, when I was very, very, very lean, which makes sense, very low energy availability, high levels of activity, lots of stress. Another time that's happened is when I was sort of in the beginning of a diet, but there was a lot going on at the time. I was doing very, very high levels of activity. I was really, really stressed out. There was a lot going on at the time. And even though my body fat percentage levels were higher, I still lost my menstrual cycle. I didn't get it back for, I think, another 9 or 10 months. It took a really long time to bring stress back down. So when you mentioned that it's really important to have a structured approach to dieting, that includes like a whole health outlook, which is really, really, it's much easier to do when you have a coach or you have some external guidance. Because even though everything was technically the same as the previous time I dieted and didn't lose my period until I was very, very lean, I hadn't factored into the equation the fact that there was so much other stress going on. Stress is a big influencer there as well.
Yeah. Shifting gears into training, back to training. Have you found differences between advice given for men and advice given for women when it comes to training?
Yeah, I think social media is definitely the guilty party there. There's a lot of misinformation going around about toning exercises versus exercises to do to get bulky. And I still see posts targeted towards women, which list out things like toning exercises for your legs, your stomach, your arms, whatever it is they're picking on in that post. It's true to say that there are some differences. I think research has found that women can generally handle higher volume training, for example, and their recovery is still fine. But truthfully, there is no such thing as toning exercises. There's nothing to support that.
What is toning?
Toning, I don't think most people would know if you ask them what they mean by that. But what it really means is a leaner physique. So having more muscle and having a lower percentage of body fat. It's the body fat that accompanies that physique, which creates the bulky look, generally speaking. We've mentioned how hard it is to put on muscle mass. Most women aren't at risk of looking bulky, especially not when you're dieting, because you're not going to be building muscle when you've been dieting for a long time. It's just, you're not going to get bulky if you start training at the same time.
One of the craziest things I remember when I was a personal trainer is when you have female clients and you program, like, let's say you start programming the same rest periods as you would for a guy client. And you've got 90 seconds between a leg press, for example. And you'll find like the guy will use every one of those 90 seconds, whereas 30 seconds after the set, the woman's ready to go. And that's obviously a broad example, but I think there's a massive recovery element that I see in when men and women train. It's probably the biggest differentiator I see in especially in programming is women will just need a lot less rest because they can just go again and perform at a high level very, very quickly. I don't know the exact reasons for it. I think it might be to do with like motor unit recruitment and how much they recruit per set. But there could be an evolutionary thing there as well, that they can just perform at a higher level with less rest.
Potentially. I like that idea. I'm not exactly sure the mechanism behind it, but we'll go with that. We're more advanced.
Go with that one. More advanced from a performance perspective. this probably is something to do with that. That's what, the pain threshold as well. Like, that's another thing I remember. Like, a woman could keep going long after you think they're done. You're pushing a guy on a leg press. As soon as he sort of slows down, he's pretty much done, right? Women just start slowing down. They just keep going, and it's really impressive to see. And I think sometimes it's useful for women to have a training partner or to hire a trainer for a few sessions and ask them to really push themselves further than they thought possible. Because I think I think a lot of women quit too early in the set because they don't realize how far they can go. And I think that's a real differentiator between the women that have great physiques and the ones that don't, in that they can just really go for it and they've unlocked that in themselves. So I think it's worth the value in hiring a trainer for a few sessions or just having a training partner and just saying to them, look, I'm going to go on the leg press, push me until I can't move. And a lot of it would just be getting over the mind sort of screaming at you saying, oh, there's a bit of, there's a burn going on. You need to push through it instead in very simple ways.
Yeah, for sure. Interesting point about the pain tolerance thing as well. You think about the women sort of experience pain on a regular basis, at least monthly, for most healthy women. So we're kind of adjusted to it.
Yeah. Alison, Chloe, have you had that experience of like when your first experience of like, oh wow, I can actually go way further than I thought was possible?
Yeah, definitely. It wasn't until I actually started like really filming my sets either that I noticed actually I wasn't slowing down at all and I had way more it left in me. And then as soon as you actually push yourself to, complete failure and you realize how far you can go, you realize how much actually you were leaving in the tank beforehand.
Yeah. Chloe, what yourself? Have you had that?
Yeah, definitely. I definitely used to do the same thing where I just sort of go through the reps. Like I'll do the classic like 3 sets of 12 or something, like whatever I sort of thought was meant to be programmed. And I really saw the changes when I started to like push to failure on every set, so the reps then drop. So for instance, at the moment, like on the hack squat, I have 2 sets and my first set is 8 to 10. And then my second set is 10 to 12. So I'll have to drop the weight for that second set. But the idea is that I'm pushing hard with my top set on the 8 to 10 rep range. And then when I drop the weight, I should struggle to get into the rep range, even though it's higher. And I think just like by doing that and not focusing just on all sets having the same reps, it really helped. Because if you're doing 12 reps on set 1 and then you're doing the same amount of reps on your last set, if the weight's the same, clearly you could have done more on that first set when you had more energy. So I think like the training progressions and everything is really important to be clear on that as well. So if anyone like is unsure, like that's where the coaching and structure to programs help.
Yeah. When it comes to like training differences, a couple other ones I've noticed is women tend to perform more reps at a higher percentage of their 1RM. So if you have a man and a woman both have a 100 kilo squat max, what I found is at 90%, a woman might sneak out, 4 or 5 reps, whereas a guy might only sneak out 2, 3 reps. I've definitely noticed that as well. And that's probably to do with sort of, again, motor unit recruitment, muscle fiber types, potentially being a slower twitch. I've definitely noticed that one as well. And then probably also frequency element. Women can handle more frequent sessions, which is why I think full body training works really, really well for a lot of women, but also, or just making sure you're hitting muscle groups 2-3 times a week. I think you just get away with it a lot more, which obviously allows you to stimulate the muscle more. Have you found that in your own training, Alice?
Yeah, I actually, so one of my biggest areas I really wanted to focus on was kind of my posterior chains, like just my back half, and mainly my glutes, because I lost them when I got really lean. So I actually started training lower body 3 times a week, and then I did upper twice a week. And I noticed that actually after that first initial period of getting used to it, that I could handle a lot of volume on my legs, and I was able to continuously progress and make a lot of changes with training lower body 3 times a week, which I didn't think I was able to do, but clearly did.
Yeah, for sure. I've found exactly the same thing. I think moving from 3 to 5 training sessions a week, I was really nervous initially, but actually my recovery was much, much better than I realized. And I was able to, I think I went up to training lower body 3 times a week as well. And I thought, you know what, after the first leg day, I'm going to be fried. I'm not going to be able to do the second one. But I was actually really, really surprised by how much I could do on the second session.
Yeah, I think also with training for females, like a lot of females are scared of upper body as well. So my training structured at the moment where I have 2 lower and then 3 upper, which are sort of split into pushing and pulling movements, and then 1 full upper. And I think I was always thinking that I had to do so much volume for my legs. Like at one point, I think I was doing them around 4 times a week, and I just wasn't recovering very well to actually push to failure with them. So with my 2 sessions now, like I actually don't think I could do enough one. With the amount I pushed, like by the time I get to the next one, I'm then I'm just recovered from the previous one. So I think that's a good sign to know if you are pushing yourself, if you're sort of not being able to add in the extra session. Because if you're able to train legs every day, then how hard are you really pushing in terms of your intensity with that amount of volume? And with upper body training, you don't want to be neglecting like the upper body and just training lower body, because just remember, like if you do want things like, say, your waist to look smaller, like this was mentioned earlier, training back is going to give that illusion of having a wider back, your waist looks narrower, and it just gives that figure that a lot of women are after.
What about menstrual cycle? Do you find that it changes how you approach your training, your nutrition, overall lifestyle? What are your different experiences of it?
Yeah, I personally don't get my periods really bad. I don't experience a lot of pain with mine. I do notice a drop in strength maybe like the day before, the day of, especially with pushing movements like shoulder press and chest press. I find that they can really take like a knock on them days. But I don't actually change my approach to training. I just sort of continue as my plan has me in place. But if I can't, say, push into my rep range with the weight I usually use, then I might just have to pull back a little bit. But personally, I don't adjust anything. But I know, Shona, you experience more pain, so you might do something differently.
Yeah, this is, I think it was, about 2 years ago, I was diagnosed with cystic ovaries. And this was after like a really long time of really suffering with my periods. And like, I had no idea why. And since then, it's been a lot easier to work around. I think this is going to be a massively individual thing. And this is another place where a coach comes in really, really helpful, because you can have that input for somebody to help you adjust your training. But for me, it's a case of keeping volume back so that my recovery is a little bit better, because some of the other symptoms around that time would be massive fatigue and very, very low mood the week before. So I know in the week going up to my period, and the length of the cycle varies, so I have to like pay attention to the symptoms. I'm going to need to deload, because there's just no way I can push the same weight as I would do in a normal session. So bringing back the volume means that I can push harder for the sets that I do without massively affecting my recovery, and then go back up the following week. But it's one of those, again, that I've seen a lot on social media about with if you're at this phase in your cycle at this number of days, you're going to have this hormonal profile, so you should do less of this and more of that. I think it's really well intentioned, but I think that negates any other conditions like PCOS. And as well, the research is much more equivocal.
Yeah, I just going off the back of that, because obviously I've seen a lot of things on social media about, the types of exercise as well you should do in certain phases. And I think, it comes down to the individual, because Chloe, as you said, like you sometimes feel quite like very low energy the first day of your period, or actually I find during the week of my period, I'm the strongest I am all month, and I get all my PBs. Like it always happens during that week. But the week before, that's when I have my low energy. And, I stick with my exact same training plan. If I go in with all the intention of kind of trying to do better or match at least what I did last week. But if I do have to pull back on something because my energy just isn't there, it's just not there for that week or that day. So I don't try to, I don't get my periods that badly. I'm very lucky. I sometimes get headaches, sometimes get a little bit fatigued, but I just listen to my body, and it takes time, it takes experience and practice doing that. But there's no need to kind of really go into real depth about what day you're on and whether that you need to change your exercises for it. I think it's all just about listening to your body and being able to push when you can push, and just draw back when you need to draw back.
Yeah, there's so much into individual variability when it comes to training and menstrual cycle that you just can't make any blanket statements. I think anyone who's making blanket statements or blanket recommendations is probably selling something around it. So just be careful of that. If you're listening and you're seeing that sort of stuff, just pay attention to your body. If you're feeling off, back off. If you're feeling strong like Alice, then go for it. As we sort of bring this episode to conclusion, what are some of the key women's myths that you fell for that you wish would just get buried forever outside of women are going to be bulky that you've personally experienced?
I think women can't be as strong as men, or women can't perform as well. That's quite a common one, and we mentioned there are going to be some gender differences. There's different sizes to factor in different muscle fiber types, but that doesn't mean your training is any less valuable. I think there's a lot of devaluing of women's training that goes around.
That's interesting. What have you personally felt on that?
It's a very subtle thing. I mean, some of it's quite subtle, some of it isn't, and people just sort of come out with things like, "Oh, you'll never be as strong as so and so," and it's like, okay, all right. But sometimes people will come out with things like, "Oh, you're quite strong for a woman." It's quite a backhanded compliment because, yeah, it's technically true, but it sort of devalues the training and the work that I put in by making that comparison between the other gender. I'd say just appreciate the training that you have.
I love it. Chloe, what about yourself?
I think the mindset of thinking that you have to be dieting forever, because I used to have that and think that I just always had to maintain this really lean physique, and like I just wouldn't like feel good if I was bigger, and I was so scared of any weight gain. So I think like that fear, because I know many women spend years like in a diet, and like they're not truly dieting. I think that's the problem. I think if you're going to commit to something, then if you do it properly, then you're going to be able to reach like that lifestyle solution a lot quicker. Because if you're spending years of, say, dieting and sort of yo-yoing in and out, not really adhering to a plan, then you're never really going to get to that end point. But if you say spend that time in fat loss, then invest the time in muscle build, drop the weight again, you might be at a place where you're happy with your physique and able to maintain that. And that is what we preach with. That is the lifestyle solution, being able to maintain a physique that you're happy with, able to perform and feel your best long term. And I didn't think that was possible at one point. And I know a lot of ladies struggle with that mentality. But if you do put in the time and work, and it does take like time, it can take years, but over time you'll gradually build up the strength to be able to like push like beyond what you thought you could do.
Amazing. Alice?
I think mine is a little bit along the lines of kind of like your physique, not necessarily bulky, but there's a lot of myths around the way that, you know, a woman maybe has to, or that should look, or is that perceived to like look a certain way, and the bulking doesn't, like, or going through a muscle building phase doesn't necessarily accommodate or go with that picture of what, you know, a woman is meant to look like. So I think, you know, muscle building is, or going into a muscle building phase can be, and especially with a coach to help you, can be tailored completely to how you want your physique to look. And that is how you can sculpt your physique. You don't necessarily like have to conform to, you know, what society or, you know, whoever's saying that a woman needs to look like. That, you know, it's okay to train upper body and you're not necessarily going to get bulky. Like, you'll just get a little bit more shape, or you'll get, you know, bigger glutes or bigger calves or whatever you want to kind of achieve. So a little bit like the bulkiness, but you're not going to get bulky just from going into a muscle building phase, and you can sculpt that exactly how you want, and it takes time. So it's not, you're not going to shoulder press tomorrow and suddenly look like Arnie. You know, it takes time. So it can be individualized to you.
Well, that was possible at one point in my life. Then I realized even as many shoulder presses as I do, I never look like Arnie. One thing you touched on there, I just want to add on to it, is body dysmorphia and the role of social media and body dysmorphia. How does it impact you guys, and how do you navigate feelings of potential inadequacy when it comes to your physique and comparison when it comes to it? I think men feel it. I know I've experienced it in the past, but it'd be good to hear from a women's perspective, especially being in the industry.
I think I used to look at images and compare myself to them, but when I switched the mindset as in like what do I need to do to achieve that, rather than comparing and feeling sorry for myself, like, oh, I don't look like that, I'm never going to look like that. And instead, like, how did that person achieve that? And I think that's when that's when I sort of had that switch, because I was quite skinny and I was looking at people and thinking, oh wow, they've got so much muscle mass, how, like, that's never going to be possible. But then I like made the change and I took action and to get to that point, instead of just sitting around and thinking, oh, like, I just look rubbish and they look amazing. So I think that really helped me.
Yeah, I think there are images of women who are massive and shredded and have abs all of the time are rampant on social media. So that comparison is really easy as well. I think something else to keep in mind is, one, you don't see what's going on behind the scenes, and they probably feel terrible most of the time because being that lean doesn't feel good. And two, a lot of these images, even videos now, are edited. That doesn't mean that everything you see is fake, but it does mean that some things aren't actually attainable. One, from a health perspective, for speaking in terms of long-term maintenance, but two, practically speaking, some of the waistlines you see carved out on images in social media, they just don't happen that way.
Really?
Yeah, some of them are quite bad. Some of it's really obvious. You can see backgrounds warped and it does look a bit silly. Like, it gets to
People
a
are doing
point
that.
where it gets to a point where it's really obvious that the picture is edited. You think anatomy doesn't work that way. But sometimes it's really quite subtle. You know, it'll be a touch up of reducing armpit fat here. It'll be bringing the waist in there. It'll be making the legs look bigger or leaner. It'll be retouching hair, makeup. And some of it is so convincing. It's really easy to buy into it. I take everything I see with a pinch of salt, and that really helps.
Wow. I had no idea that was going on at such a big level. Is that more in the bodybuilding circles, or is that in more sort of fitness influencer, or is it just everywhere?
Unfortunately, it's everywhere. I think fitness influencers are notoriously bad for it. I've seen a few accounts debunking some of these images and comparing to the unedited photos, which is quite interesting and quite refreshing. But, you know, we already know it's a thing in the cosmetic industry to play on women's insecurities. I don't see why that wouldn't extend to fitness influencers in particular as well. People with hundreds of thousands or millions of followers are probably the more susceptible ones as well.
Okay, as we this time we'll close it off now, and to finish up, Chloe, what's one tip for a woman starting their journey right now?
If you haven't got one already, I'd definitely recommend getting a coach, because that's where I struggled at the start. I didn't know what I was doing. I had no structure. And if you do have a coach and you're going, say, into fat loss or muscle build, just trust what they say, because they know, they've probably experienced it like us. Like, if you're being coached by any of us, then you know that we've been through it, experienced it, and we know like how to get the results that you want. So I'd just say, like, trust the process and invest the time, and then you'll get the results that you're after long term.
Shona, what about yourself?
I would say be prepared to be patient and work hard. And that's not to discourage people. That's to say that your efforts will be rewarded, because, you know, we've spoken about social media quite a bit, but there's a lot of short-term quick fixes being sold. I think if that were working, we'd all be doing it. It's a long-term investment, and it's one that's worth doing because it's your health that's on the line. So be prepared to have to be patient with it and put in the work.
And let's drop a bombshell at the end.
Yeah, I would say that just lean into the process. So whether you are going into a dieting phase or a muscle building phase, completely have 100% faith in your coach. Trust what they're saying. You do have to have patience. You won't always see the results straight away that you want to see, but they will happen if you are consistent with it. So just completely lean into it. And yeah, that's it really.
Yeah, one from me, coming from a guy, but hopefully it's still applicable. But I think it's just it's the long-term approach, and it's probably building on Shona said that I think women have been sold the quick fix mentality more than men. I think men get it in a different way, probably around building their biceps in 6 weeks. But I think women get it from all angles, whether it's dieting, juice cleanses, extreme fat loss, toning, all this, like, which isn't even really a thing. And I think they're just hit by way more myths, and probably why we've done a lot more women's health, women's myth busting of late, because I think it's just just getting to that point where we speak to more and more women who've just been burnt for so many decades. And oftentimes RNT is the solution to help them break that dieting cycle. So I think it's starting to become more of a passion of mine to bring this more to the light, because I think it's a message that needs to be spread from multiple different perspectives. I think guys' perspective, women's perspective, coaches' perspective, clients' perspective. And I think if women can take that long-term approach and know that if you do it so slowly, safely, in a sustainable manner with a structure behind it, you can achieve the body of your dreams and more. And that more is areas you never thought were possible. It's your mindset, your careers, your relationships. And that's when you can realize and unlock the physical to be the vehicle in your life in ways you won't expect. And I think that's the beauty of this journey. So thanks for coming on the RNT Fitness Radio. Good to see Alice on her first debut today, and look forward to hearing all the feedback.